right. Welcome back to Top 5 Vinyl, where we show love to vinyl owners. Today I'm here with Concert Buddy. How's it going, sir?
Man, if I was doing any better, I'd be you, sir. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Glad to hear it. And before we get started, I want everybody to subscribe to the channel, like the channel, tell your friends all that cool stuff you guys got to do for YouTube.
That's right.
Concert Buddy, I understand you have a YouTube page.
Yeah. I had been one of those creepers for years, watching folks in the vinyl community talking about records, learning about the hobby, how they collect, what they collect. And then about 2021, it was kind of right around the COVID disaster stuff going
Hmm.
on. Finally got enough pushes from people I knew locally in the community and otherwise, hey, why don't you try this? And so I went from, obviously being behind the screen to in front of the screen. And it's been great for the most part. Well, I'd say 99% has been great. In terms of, like obviously it's what you think it is, and it's also not what you think it is, because what I thought it was, oh, I'm gonna show and tell, and that's
Hmm.
but it's brought so much more into my life in terms of the great people I've connected with, mutual respect and appreciation and love of music and the hobby, and sharing best practices of how we're finding like now there's different, I would say, different levels or different phases of record collecting, and
Hmm.
where I find myself now, I'm really leaning into like getting like the OGs and the originals, like that's like
Hmm.
my space. And now I've fortunately networked with a lot of people who also create on YouTube, who create on other platforms, Instagram, etc. So it's been a great gateway to really get to know people, but also like find people and connect into something I love and something they love too.
Nice. Yep, I hear you. And where can the people find you? What is your handle? Where can the people find you
Yeah,
on?
so the YouTube channel is Concert Buddy, Buddie. The spelling is intentional, and it's kind of a family thing. But then also through the YouTube channel, I've kind of expanded. We do a thing over my left shoulder. It's called Vinyl Community Podcasts, and again a kind of expansion of the idea of connecting with people. And I love listening to podcasts. And I noticed that in the community and the vinyl sphere at large, there wasn't a ton of let's call it off camera
Mhm.
content. And, I'd like to take long drives and road trips, going to record stores, going to concerts, what have you. And there are some podcasts, a shout out to guys like Dylan Noble Records had his local discography for a minute, but he owns a record store. So,
Mhm.
trying to find balance between record store and doing a podcast, it can be tough. So a lot of people started podcasts and did nice work. The Vinyl Guide is a guy who's in it for the long haul, has a great podcast. The Record Store Day podcast that's hosted by Paul Myers, Mike Myers' brother. It's another good listen. But in terms of like more of a smaller kind of situation, I didn't see that there was something out there. So I started it. I partnered with a lot of other, let's call it graduating class of high school content creators on YouTube, but basically folks that had channels in similar age to mine.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we kind of launched this project to dual platform a lot of the stuff we were already doing on our channels, interviews, talking about current events or sharing best practices and how we collect or what we collect, what kind of sleeves do you use,
Mhm.
what kind of pressings are you after, all kind of stuff. And it's really matured into a really, now we're coming up on 2 years, a really great not only extension of the YouTube situation. I kind of like doing this stuff a little bit more than YouTube, to be honest with
Mhm.
you.
Mhm.
Only in the sense of, like I said, I enjoy podcasts, and it's kind of matured to. We do a weekly live stream called Surface Noise on my channel. Actually, it's dual platform, dual channel. I have a partner, Spins Vinyl. It's
Mhm.
another channel out there, Spins with a Z. So we do it every week, and him and I alternate hosting duties. And so we have a rotating cast of vinyl collectors, and we talk about current events.
Mhm.
We have some games. We like tell funny stories, terrible stories, times we got ripped off, times some people might
Mhm.
have ripped somebody else off.
Mhm.
All the gamut of this very unique and niche world of record collecting. So
Mhm.
it's a lot of
Mhm.
fun. So you've got Concert Buddy YouTube, you've got Surface Noise live stream, and then you've got Vinyl Community Podcast. So,
Nice.
boy.
Nice. That's pretty cool. Okay. Now on to you, because you're the main attraction.
The lady satisfaction. You know how it is, man.
Concert Buddy. Let's flip this up a little bit. How many record players do you think you've been through in your life?
That's a good question. Um, I would say my adult life, I can probably count on maybe two hands. I kind of got back into the hobby, like myself in my adult fully formed state, maybe 2008, 9, 10, somewhere in there.
Mm.
I remember my mom for my birthday gifted me just a plug and play Sony preamp built into it, kind of turntable, automatic return, that sort of thing. So that kind
Hmm.
of gave me a turntable to play the records on because I was, it was like a lot of folks. I love music so much. And when I was a kid, most of the records were owned by my mom or,
Hmm.
adults, right? So I had like come up in the CD era. So I
Hmm.
remember like buying CDs for myself, but I never really got into vinyl. So fast forward into the late 2000s, and if you go to thrift stores or estate sales or what have you, you could get like an instant record collection
Hmm.
for chump change, right?
Right.
So it was kind of that. Plus, it was obviously there's like a certain kind of, I don't want to say magic because it sounds cheesy, but there's just a certain something of being able to hold
Oh yeah.
the tactile, right? You know what I mean? Not only do you hold, and it's like it's a whole process. So you have to physically, like streaming's great, it's convenient. The iPods were amazing, all that kind of stuff for convenience. But in terms of actually immersing yourself in the listening experience,
Hmm.
making the record, it's like a ritual. You put it on the turntable, you drop the
Hmm.
needle, you sit back. Ideally, you're not multitasking like a lot of us like tend
Hmm.
to do when you listen to music now. We're
Hmm.
trying to get a lot done if it's working out or working or what have you. But when you're listening to vinyl, you've got to literally commit to the experience. And
Hmm.
something that, like, in this really fast-paced world we live in, it's something that makes you kind of take pause and really immerse yourself in the experience. So 2008, 9, it was a nice way to reconnect with music on that level. But also, I mean, the art on some of these albums is amazing. And when
Hmm.
you're in a CD and you got the little booklet, it's behind a little plastic jewel case. It's not the same, but going
Hmm.
back to holding that in a lot of cases 12 by 12 jacket, the gatefold, the art, like I'm taken back to like the Queen album News of the World when I was a kid, and you see that robot and you're like,
Hmm.
whoa, what's going on? He's got his fingers in blood, and like, oh, it's really intense, right? So to reconnect with that, plus obviously we talked about this where we started. Anytime you can kind of connect with stuff from your youth, it's a lot of fun, and
Right.
that's a lot of passion comes from. So I know you asked me how many record players. So that was the first one in my adult life. I would say I mean, I have two in this room here.
Hmm.
I've got my main one downstairs. I think we're pushing probably seven, I
Okay.
think, in
Okay.
that time. Because, you start with, like I said, the Sony one, and then you're like, that's nice, but there's nicer. And
Right.
so you
Right.
get to this, and then there's nicer, but there's nicest.
Hmm.
It's always
Hmm.
a continuing journey. I'm far from an audiophile, but I'm intrigued and chasing like great sound.
Hmm.
And I'm not necessarily willing to throw down the fat bucks for it, but I
Hmm.
think there's a common ground of decent amount of money, decent amount of equipment, and then really just kind of committing to the process, like I was talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Uh, Favorite record store?
Ooh, so it's funny on my channel. I always it's very rare I talk about my locals because I don't want to, I want to be a positive experience when I come in. Hey, Chan, whatever.
Hmm.
But I gotta go back to one thing I really enjoy doing is traveling and going to different record stores and new places. And I remember the first time I went to Amoeba Records in
Hmm.
Hollywood-ish, the old location, not the new one. I haven't been to the new one yet, but just, I'd read about it online, and the pictures and the readings didn't do it justice. This place was just so expansive.
Hmm.
Not only the high heat, rare records they had on the walls, but just so much. Like you literally need to commit a day
Hmm.
just to kind of ingratiate yourself into where things are,
Hmm.
getting deep in the bins, that sort of thing. And then plus, like it was in Hollywood, so I saw like an actor like
Hmm.
literally digging records. I'm like, oh, I watched this guy's show, and of course, my wife, she loves the Hollywood scene, and so she was just like, you should go up and talk to him. I'm like, no, man, this guy's got his headphones in. Like, I'm not even gonna mess with this guy, but
Right.
I mean, it's just like, hey, he's a record collector. I'm a record collector. It's pretty wild. So I'd say Amoeba, and then for my 40th birthday a couple of years ago. I wanted to do what I call the Amoeba Triangle. So Amoeba has three locations. They've got one in LA, they got one in San Francisco, and they have one in Berkeley, California.
Hmm.
So for my 40th, we flew to San Francisco and I ran the Golden Gate Bridge and yada yada. So we went to San Francisco, Amoeba. Then we went to Berkeley the next day, and then we took a plane and
Hmm.
flew down to LA. So that was kind of it was a fun little game, but I wouldn't recommend it for everybody.
Hmm.
But it was nice to really kind of lean into the hobby in that way, and then also like, oh, it's my 40th. Let's do something fun.
Hmm. Okay. And with your own money, first vinyl record that you ever bought?
I was hoping you'd ask this one. So going back to, like being a kid and my mom had a bunch of records and she didn't take great care of her records, let's put it that way. I can remember she played her records, right? She
Hmm.
played them, she danced, so she'd have the big stack. She wouldn't put them back in the sleeves. They'd just be a big
Hmm.
wax mess, right? And
Right,
that's great.
right.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful in its own way. But I didn't have any like adult records. So I remember the first record that I got as a kid, and I'm pretty sure it was my own money. It might have been a gift too. Was it went to like, like an antique store or something, and they had uh you're gonna laugh. We were just kind of talking about it. It was a Transformers like cartoon record where they were like, it wasn't anything off of the TV show,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like the actors, like, because like He-Man did something similar. Like there was always these kind of extended episodes or just completely new content episodes on records only. And so it was a
Mm-hmm.
whole story. So you'd play
Mm-hmm.
like side A and you hear Peter Cullen and hear all the
Yeah.
actors, maybe, and then you'd flip it over. And so I remember sitting in the back seat and I was so jazzed because again, Art, oh, Optimus Prime and all these cool guys and it was like the Dinobots, I was like, oh man, Grimlock, all
Mm.
those cats. And yeah, that was really exciting because like it was actually mine.
Right,
You know what I
right.
mean? And I'm like, and of course, was my mom going to listen to the Autobots and Decepticons fight? Come on, she listens to the Beatles and all that. So that was the first time I can remember actually having a record that was truly mine.
That's awesome. Okay. With that being said, concert buddy, this is top five
Yeah.
vinyl.
All
What
right,
is
so
number fifth five that you have in front of you?
number five, like the old
Yes,
subway,
sir.
right? So I have to preface this by saying, like, I probably overthought a lot of this because in terms of like ranking, like I didn't know if it was definitive or if this just
Mhm.
like the story. So there's a lot of there's a melting pot of reasons I chose these records. So the first
Okay.
one I'm gonna show, number five,
Yes.
is that. So this is David Gray, White
Mhm.
Lab. David Gray is a singer-songwriter out of England. It came out in 1998. It didn't come out on vinyl. This is a nice gatefold until 2020. So this is one of those records that comes out in 98. I'm starting to kind of form my adult music tastes. He had actually been dropped from his record label. So
Mhm.
he self-produced this and made this basically in his own flat in the UK. He self-financed it because he opened up for Dave Matthews Band on
Mhm.
like tours to kind of be able to fund it himself. And it turned out this album comes out, obviously the title track, and it made him like I would say super duper star, but it brought him to the masses, right? Where it gave him a new record deal, it gave him a whole career. I remember a girlfriend at the time turned me on to this record, so it was something that I wasn't exactly finding myself. It was kind of brought to me, but
Mhm.
David's one of my favorite singer-songwriters, and again from that late '90s era when things weren't put on vinyl,
Mhm.
was longing for this to come out on wax. And in 2020, like I said, they finally did it. This is the Vinyl Me Please
Mhm.
version. This is a 2 by 45 RPM, so it's got more space to let the music breathe. To me, it's the definitive version of this on vinyl. They also did, you'd think white ladder, you'd think white vinyl. That'd be like a no-brainer. And they
Mhm.
did do a white vinyl treatment on this, but it was only at 33 RPM, and it sounds good.
Mhm.
But when you can give it the runway on 2 discs,
Mhm.
really spread out. Like this is fantastic. So I was not only does it is it great music, it was something that I'd been looking for and waiting to be on vinyl for, definitely since I started collecting again 2008, 9, 10
Mhm.
era. You know what I mean? So it's happy to finally get this on vinyl. So this is number
Nice.
five.
All right, cool. Nice. Okay. That's number five. Let's go ahead and take a look at your number four.
Number
I see
four. All
smiles
right.
over there, sir. What you got over there?
Well, I mean, and again, people watching this are going to be like, this guy is just so vanilla. But the reality is, I mean, everybody's
Mhm.
got to have Michael Jackson Thriller. And
Absolutely.
going back to what we're talking about, connecting with music as a young, I
Mhm.
remember MTV and I remember being a little kid and Beat It came out, like MTV was it, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Because it brought the music to a theatrical, to a more digestible way. And it also like made the music have additional meaning. Like you could
Mhm.
listen to this on the radio and listen to Beat It or the girl, the lead single on this, I didn't know this until I got deep into collecting, was "The Girl Is Mine," that song with Paul McCartney. And
Mhm.
there's obviously the whole story with him and the Beatles catalog and all that stuff. But what a weird, I mean, guys, what a weird lead single when you think about all the monster hits that came from this, right?
Mhm.
That "The Girl Is Mine" was the lead single. But anyway, so yeah, so tremendous album. As a kid, Beat It just like blew my mind. Obviously, the fight scene, the dance fight scene, obviously the Eddie Van Halen solo. I mean,
Mhm.
just so much as a kid of the 80s to just like eat like a buffet. And then obviously the songwriting, you've got Michael working with Quincy Jones again, like he did on
Mhm.
Off the Wall. Now, I know Spike Lee would like to say that Off the Wall was a superior record, and that's a fair. It's a
Hmm.
fair argument because Off the Wall is tremendous as well. But um, I mean, Thriller is where it's at. 82. This is like, if it's not the biggest selling record of all time, it takes turns with the Eagles' greatest hits, and
Hmm.
rightfully so. And then obviously going back to the MTV piece, Thriller. Thriller was like one of the first long form videos that really, again, took a song that if you heard it just on the radio is a good song,
Hmm.
but then with all the zombies dancing and
Hmm.
the Vincent Price piece and the different scene sets, to go from, he was dancing and he was on a date to then he's a zombie to then the end he's the werewolf, like unreal. So this album, like just from that alone, is like very endearing to me. And then obviously you start collecting records. There's so many different variants of this. This is the half speed master,
Hmm.
uh, probably 84, audio file pressing, whatever. But obviously the true first pressing is the one that will say on the back, if it says this where it just has that credit line produced by Quincy Jones, that usually means it was the first pressing.
Hmm.
Because Michael was a little upset and he wanted co-producing credits. So
Hmm.
the subsequent second, third, fourth pressing, because this record sold millions,
Hmm.
millions,
Hmm.
would say co-produced by Michael Jackson.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
so this is one of those records that obviously I connect with from that level. But then as a collector, it's sad to say this, but if I can find originals in the wild cheap and
Yeah.
I look for that songwriting credit, I'll grab one because I usually gift it because this is one of those ultimate dance records. If you put it
Absolutely.
on,
Yeah.
especially the first pressing because it was mastered by Bernie Grundman, sounds tremendous. Like
Hmm.
so, if there's one to have, it's definitely the first pressing.
All right, cool. So that was your number four. Let's go ahead and take a look at your number three.
All right, so number three is where I think I became a I don't want to say bona fide record collector, but talking about the phases, right? Talking about the music is paramount, but this is 1970. This is
Hmm.
Rodriguez, Cold Fact. This record, when it first came out, tanked, terrible.
Hmm.
Rodriguez was a singer-songwriter of Detroit, in the style of, for lack of a better word, Bob Dylan. And this album, he did have another follow-up album called Coming from Reality, also didn't do well. And then his label dropped him. He was on the Sussex label, which was at the time like a kind of a more of a thought of like a soul funk label. Like Bill Withers was on the label.
Hmm.
It was distributed by Buddha Records, etc. So he was kind of an afterthought to history and time. So fast forward to kind of right around the time I started to get into records as an adult, called 2008, 9, 10. Light in the Attic Records reissues this album in conjunction with a project. There was a documentary that came out, I think, in 2012, ultimately, and won the Academy Award that year for Best Documentary,
Hmm.
called Searching for Sugar Man. And that's where I learned about this artist, his music, his story. It's a fascinating story because while his music didn't do well in the States, I think it was a year or two after somehow the album made its way to South Africa.
Hmm.
If you remember, this is like during apartheid and there's a lot of civil unrest. And for the young people, the music from this album was kind of like a lot of rallying calls to a lot of the movement, right?
Hmm.
And so the government, in fact, if a radio station wanted to play this on the air, the documentary shows it that the government literally made them cross out with a nail certain tracks to make the
Hmm.
record playable in certain parts to,
Hmm.
for the censorship. They didn't
Hmm.
want the population to hear some of these songs because they're galvanizing a lot of the young people. So anyway, watch the documentary, blew me away because this is a guy lost to time. He has this like big career, not even big career. He didn't even know about it. He was huge in South Africa and even Australia to a certain extent. And it wasn't until this guy from South Africa tried finding him in, let's call it, the 90s, early 2000s, because there had been rumors that he had killed himself by lighting himself on fire on
Hmm.
stage. A lot of like, and this is before the internet, so this is
Hmm.
before real crazy conspiracy stuff. And so this guy, just as a passion project, was making this documentary, searching for Sugar Man, one of the songs on this album, Sugar Man. And so, he finds his daughter, ultimately finds him. Come to find out, he just had a very quiet life in Detroit. He ran like for local politics. He was in construction. He lived in an extremely modest home. Had no idea that in South Africa he was revered. And so this documentary project flew him to South Africa, booked some shows for him. And so you got a guy whose career and his mind didn't go anywhere.
Hmm.
He goes to South Africa. He's selling out stadiums, like
Hmm.
literally, like people are in lather, like he's
Hmm.
alive. Rodriguez also. So anyway, amazing story, and that's what especially music I didn't know about, and it was well before my time. That's the stuff that fires me up. And as a
Mm-hmm.
record collector, that's the stuff I really want to dig my teeth into, especially if I like the music. And the music on this is tremendous. So fast forward to, gosh, let's call it 5 or 6 years ago, I'm hunting for this record.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not a cheap record, but I ended up through the grace or opportunity of Instagram. I found a shop in Miami that had this, and I contacted him immediately. I saw him posted in a video or a post, and I got a great price. As you can see, it's still in shrink. One of my friend Rob at the channel Northern Revolutions is quite jealous of this because he's also a fan of Rodriguez. And for me, this is a top copy. But also, it's not even just the condition of the record; it's the story, it's the music, it's the total package of why I collect records. If that makes
Mm.
sense.
That's a great story. Okay. All right. So that was your number three. Let's go ahead and take a look at your number two.
All right, so now I did say that there's probably gonna be people watching this and gonna be like, "Man, this guy is Cornball Jones," and that's okay. But I got to show this, and I gotta hang on. I'm gonna put up a because there is a little. Well, I don't even have everything out. This is gonna be weird, but I'm
Oh,
gonna
it's
put my
the,
hand up.
there
So
you
this is
go.
Nirvana. This is Nevermind. Obviously, people know why my hand is here.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a record that comes out in 1991. This is a first press. Again, talking
Mm-hmm.
about record collecting. This is, I'll kind of get into the story about that part of it. But, I'm a teenager at this point, 1991. Matter of fact, you asked, before, like the first record I bought with my own money when my musical tastes were really forming was like middle school era. The first CDs that
Mm-hmm.
I bought in probably '94 were Nirvana in Utero and
Mm-hmm.
Snoop Doggy Dogg at the time, Doggy Style. Bought
Mm-hmm.
them at the Best Buy store. Man, I was so jazzed. My
Mm-hmm.
CDs. And man, my mom hated Doggy Style because I'd play that thing and there'd be so all kind of, mom was like, I can't believe, bees and hoes and all this
Right.
stuff. Like, anyway, so that kind of was my gateway. And I knew Nirvana from the radio and obviously things happen after Cobain passed, etc. But this record is essentially what killed hair metal. I mean, this
Mm-hmm.
was a dawning of a new type of rock with grunge and just more, I wouldn't say authentic, but that's probably the best word in terms of like people just getting in a room, writing rock music and making it. And it changed the face of music. I mean, this is for my generation. You've got Thrill, you've got like those certain seminal albums that
Mm-hmm.
you've got kids now wearing Nirvana t-shirts that have been, I mean, no idea, you know what I mean? It's more of a fashion play, but
Mm-hmm.
I think this was Nirvana's second album. The first album, Bleach, was done on Sub Pop for like $600, and they were actually, I think, recording this with Butch Vig from Garbage. Originally, it was going to be on Sub Pop, but then they got picked up by Geffen. They recorded it at Sound City Studios, the famous recording place where like Fleetwood Mac Rumors was. So many other famous albums. There was that great documentary that Dave Grohl from Nirvana later did about it. But anyway, this is a monster.
Mm-hmm.
Changed the face of popular music for sure. This was Dave Grohl, speaking of, his first album with the band. I think Chad Fanning was the drummer before him. And in fact, some of the tracks they originally did for this album had him on drums. So
Mm-hmm.
like I think Polly, some of the first like four songs they wrote before they got picked up by Geffen, and were pre Dave Grohl. But anyway, this is again, it's kind of weird, but
Right, right.
and it's an iconic cover too. Later you heard that this kid, as he
You,
grew up,
you
he
want to
tries to
sue him? Yeah.
and yeah, because again, he's he was upset that he felt taken advantage. I don't know, weird stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of great album, and this has been repressed so many times. Matter of fact, on my channel, I just came back from a record excursion to North Carolina, and I picked up a different pressing of this one. I've got the original, I've got the first European, I've got
Mm-hmm.
that one, I've got the 30th anniversary. This is one of those records that, dare I say, I'd be a completist on because I'm always like it has such an affinity and an importance in terms of my musical sphere that
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say you can't get enough of it. I mean, because I hate to say it, the original is the one that sounds the best, but it's also the most expensive. So kids
Mm-hmm.
don't take them home. But I will say that if you run across an original, it's worth the Velveeta. That's all I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
say.
Mm-hmm.
That'd
Nice.
be number two.
All right, cool. And concert Buddy for the grand finale. What do we have for number one?
Numero uno. Well, anybody that's been watching my channel or the podcast or whatever probably already knows where I'm going with this one. But I'm going Huey Lewis in the new sports.
Mm.
Again, a common theme you've probably picked up from me talking about these records is these are albums that really connected with me through my journey when I was younger and really honed a love of music. This album, I want to say this is 82, this is 83 because they just had the 40th anniversary. This comes out in 83. So I'm a little guy. I'm probably still in some diapers at this point.
Mm,
But the music, Heart of Rock and Roll, amazing song, right? For me, like all the songs, they even said later that this was an album that they purposely wrote for singles, right? Because at the time, like the way that you got on radio is you got to write songs for radio, songs to be
mm,
hits. So it wasn't necessarily you'll hear bands talk about we wrote an album. They wrote songs that they put on an album for the purpose of having hits, and this has like a
mm,
one-inch drug, like this is like a hit factory.
mm,
The scene, actually, matter of fact, this was from a bar. I think it was in Mill Valley, California. So that's like Northern California. It's called the 2 a.m. Club. It's just a place where literally sports would be on. There might be a band playing. They wanted to kind of lean into that because Huey Lewis in the news. This is sports. Later, they had an album called Weather. They really kind of were kind of tongue in cheeking it with news, weather, sports,
mm,
that kind of thing. They obviously made other albums for, and that sort of thing. But this is the one that kind of took this band to another dimension, another height of stardom and popularity. Because then, obviously Back to the Future comes out in like
mm,
85. Huey Lewis, Power of Love is in it. He's actually in the movie because, he's done some acting. He was in some movie like Gwyneth Paltrow. Like he's dipped his toe in the bathwater. And matter of fact, I think they just did a Broadway play of like, I know Back to the Future, but I think he was involved in like some kind of
mm,
Broadway play too. Anyway, back to me. This is the Mobile Fidelity. This was actually came out around the same time as the original pressing. This is one of the old MoFis before they were found to be recording them digitally and yada yada. But man, this is the album that at one point when I got into collecting records heavy, anytime I'd see this record, I'd grab it. It was
mm,
like a $2 record at the time.
mm.
In my ridiculous mind, I thought, I'm gonna get every copy there is. And then when people want one, they got to come to me, right?
Right, right,
Without realizing this album sold millions,
right.
millions. So even if I could get them for $2 a pop, I don't have 2 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like it was such a far-fetched idea, but anyway. So
Wishful thinking.
I've got about 20 copies.
Say, wow. Okay. Okay.
About 18 too many. But anyway, it's an album that literally one of the things that really with Thriller really birthed my love of music and like MTV again, going back to MTV. It was just a different time that music was just, again, it really pulled on your emotions because they obviously had the music part, but you had the visual with the videos, and
Hmm.
it really gave an extension of what the music meant. So anyway, if you listen to new sports, number one, my ride or die. I'll probably this list will probably evolve over the years, but what won't change is Huey Lewis and the new sports number one.
Nice. All right, cool. Well, concert buddy, I want to thank you so much for your time and being a part of this journey with me.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity and really great to connect. Love what you're doing on your channel.
Appreciate it, man. We'll talk soon.
Let's do it.
Yeah, man.